So I'm Jordan. Yes, I work with a group called Marcellus, Shale Earth First. I'm also involved with a fledgling group that's going to be doing ecosystem surveys, but more on that later potentially. When I was first going to do this, I put together sort of a description. So I'm going to read something real quick that sort of gets a precursor to talk about state land in general as it relates to the leasing of natural gas and sort of like forests in general. And then I'll go from there and talk a little bit about what the status of leasing on public lands in Pennsylvania is, and then I'll talk about the Loyalsock State Forest and the campaign I'm involved with. So the early 20th century left the old growth forests of the Northeast clear-cut and degraded from intensive logging. Over the past 60 to 120 years, many areas have grown back and they're now mature forests. In PA alone, 60% of the state's land area is forested and is again threatened before it has a chance to become old growth. Throughout the region, natural gas industry has been ramping up its plans. As we know, it's building pipelines, compressor stations, power plants, and other infrastructure to crisscross the state and to crisscross and fragment forests, fields, and water ecosystems that humans and non-humans alike depend on. So the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Bureau of Forestry, manages 2.2 million acres of forests. About 700,000 of that is available for natural gas extraction. So recently, we had heard Governor Wolf stated that he would put a moratorium on new drilling leases on state land. This does not actually halt drilling on previous leases or areas that have subsurface rights not owned by the state. So privately owned subsurface rights. So there are approximately 3,000 wells that could potentially be on public land. Right now, there's only about 1,000 on state lands. And in this, I put this picture up here. In the orange, there are wells on state lands. So let's see. The Loyalsock State Forest is right here on the east side, on the west side of Highway 14 in Lycoming County, just north of Williamsport. There are already development. What is proposed is to drill in this area that is mostly intact and unfragmented, but large-scale development would occur. So, this is the Loyalsock State Forest. These dots right here are well pads. There's about 25 proposed well pads. This area is 25,000 acres. It's called the Clarence Moore Tracts. Large-scale development is proposed. Miles of new roads, pipelines, some water. The blue squares are water impoundments. The red ones are compressor stations, and these white ones are well pads. So this is in this large forest that is largely unfragmented. The colors here, green or this yellow, means that the state does have surface rights but does not have mineral rights. The blue, however, they don't have any surface rights or mineral rights. It just so happens that the blue areas also contain very sensitive upland wetland areas and other ecosystems for threatened and endangered species. So the red dotted line is the old loggers path. So just a little bit also about this forest, I guess, which is important to mention. It's a very popular place for hiking, fishing, camping. The old Loggers Path was in Backpackers Magazine last year. Sort of like this call to hike the old Loggers Path before they frack the forest. Hopefully that will never happen. But again, most of this land here, that they want to frack in, the state does not own the mineral rights, but does have some leverage as far as, since they have surface rights, they have some leverage to prevent the drilling from happening or mitigate it largely, which I'm going to talk more about a bit later. But there are two companies that actually own the subsurface rights: Anadarko Petroleum Corporation and Southwestern Energy, which has a lease. So the question was, how did they obtain the rights? The Central Pennsylvania Lumber Company, when they sold it to the state in 1930s, they only sold the surface. Anadarko pretty much just inherited it. And now there's sort of lumber baron heirs are starting to come out and say that they own the subsurface rights. So there's sort of a contentious thing around who actually does own the subsurface rights, because Anadarko says they do and they inherited it. So we'll see if what comes out of that. There may be a court case, I'm not sure. And just, as far as these companies, Anadarko and Southwestern are both well known for environmental violations as well as like ongoing colonization. Southwestern Energy, you may have heard about, was involved in a crackdown of indigenous folks in the Mi'kmaq up in so-called Canada, who were fighting fracking from happening on their land. Southwestern Energy called in the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, et cetera. They have pulled out for this year, but they're going to re-enter. So that's a company that is engaged in this ongoing colonization through fracking. Anadarko, just to say something about them because they're pretty ominous, their work, lots of violations, dumping in Sproul State Forest. They had a 25% stake in the BP oil spill, and to this date have not paid anything for the cleanup. Their security managers and some of their higher up PR people are actively training the oil and gas industry, basically saying you should be reading the counterinsurgency manual and working with law enforcement, and there's sort of a new security apparatus that's forming. If anyone wants to talk more about that, I can. But so these companies are relentless. They're also very ruthless in their work. And the forest that they want to invade is very sensitive and magical. So I'm actually, if you can go to the next slide, something I think that's really important, especially when we're talking about state forest land, is what we're fighting for, not just what we're fighting against. So this is a view, this is a sharp top vista. Just a little bit to the east of where this picture is one of the proposed well pads, actually a whole ridge we proposed, but this is just kind of like one picture. If you could go to the next one. I have a few pictures of this forest and some of the species that live there. This is a picture of Rock Run. Maybe folks have heard about it. It's an exceptional value trout stream. There's two of them actually in the forest. This is one of them, Rock Run, and the other one's Pleasant Stream. But the water is blue, and the way the rocks sort of form is very unique. Also, a lot of swimmers go there. So a lot of the development occurs in the watershed of Rock Run, and so threatens sort of this pristine waterway. This is a picture of a wetland area. Something that's that the Loyalsock has a lot of is these upland wetland areas that are high elevation. So they contain a lot of unique species, and this is sort of showing a little bit of the colors going into the fall. This is a sundew, or this is sundew. This is one of the more of the colorful species that exist in some of these wetlands. This one's from the water, from the headwaters of Doe Run. There are others like the pitcher plant that folks have seen. It's a carnivorous plant that lives up there. There are others. There are some threatened species such as the cotton grass porfen, among others. So these wetlands are really close to some of the development. There's actually a water impoundment to be proposed through one of these wetland areas, which is part of a hemlock grove. Here's our friend, the timber rattlesnake. They also live in the forest in many of the areas that are threatened with the development plan. There was actually, I think it was either Audubon or Sierra Club did like this virtual tour to check out like where all the proposed, like it basically was a written down thing that you could follow and take a tour of the Loyalsock to find out where the development was occurring. And when they did that and they were taking pictures along the way, they found up in the Loyalsock, in the road, a ran over timber rattlesnake. So they like to bask on pavement. They like to be on south side facing hills, which some of those, specifically Sullivan Mountain, there's well pads right downwind of that. There's a bat. We have bats living there in trees. They would convert permanently just from well pads at least 500 acres of forest, and that doesn't take into consideration all of the pipeline right-of-ways, all of the roads that would fragment through these forests and cut down second and third growth trees. This little mammal is a northern water shrew. There's only 2 or so that they found in the Loyalsock, but they do exist, and they need a specific fast-running, sort of cold, mountainous river. Something cool about them is they have their hands have sort of these webs on them, so they actually run across the water. They're really small. They're like this big. They're probably closer to this. So they're hard to find, but there have been sightings, and there's some baseline data for this, and hopefully, we're working on potentially getting more. Here's another critter that is threatened that they found in 2012 in the forest. This is the yellow-bellied flycatcher. It's a migratory songbird that comes from the south, and where the Loyalsock is perfectly in line with a corridor for these migratory songbirds. There are others like the Swainson's thrush, and there are a few other migratory birds that are threatened from this development, and the Audubon Society considers the Loyalsock to be an important bird area. It's designated as that. And this is one of those birds that we're going to be looking for, and hopefully out in the field doing some surveys to see if we can find them, because they haven't been seen in a few years. Little lesser known and not really state listed like some of the other animals that we looked at before, but I also think it's important to recognize that habitat for these species that aren't necessarily in low populations or threatened and state listed also are living there and have a right to live and have inherent value. So this is another, black bears live there. There's lots of them. We've been out there, some of us, seeing these black bears, seeing their scat on the trailways, knowing they need large expansive areas to roam in, and this forest in particular is a corridor. It does contain pretty large intact forest areas. This guy's on a road. They walk on roads, they walk along them. There's more roads that are proposed, increases the risks of being struck. And yeah, they're pretty awesome. So this is a tree sit that Marcellus Shale first did for 30 days. This was basically along a proposed road that would lead to a water compressor station, a water impoundment, a compressor station, and a well pad. And this was along the road leading to those things, basically within the danger zone of where they would cut trees. So we did this for 30 days, and the person, Hellbender, that was up there, we named it after the old salamander, Hellbender. But basically, part of this was constantly having updates and raising awareness and really highlighting the issue. So the person up there was writing every day, and we would put it on our website, throw it over social media, get the issue more out there. We want Loyalsock State Forest and this development plan to be a household name amongst people in Pennsylvania, but also throughout the region. Our ground support people also saw black bears right near that. So that tree sit was in the habitat in the range of black bears, for sure. Meanwhile, during the same day, this was Friday the 13th, so we did a a demo at the same time at the headquarters of Anadarko in Williamsport. So we said Anadarko is bad luck for the Loyalsock. Earth First is bad luck for Anadarko. And yeah, we did the little cat. This is Friday the 13th. So this was a follow-up sort of action that we had done post Shale Field Justice Spring Break, which this year's actually just was right before this camp. But last year we did an action and blockaded the road. There's 2 lock boxes and people are tied into them. Each one of them weigh between 400 and 700 pounds. And we blocked them for about 6 hours. It was an Anadarko well pad, but behind that was Range Resources, the Water Impoundment. There was a few other companies, and there was only one way in, but we basically blocked like 6 or 7 companies. But we were targeting Anadarko because of, this was in the Tyodotin State Forest, but we were targeting Anadarko because of what they want to do in the Loyalsock State Forest. And so we still have some folks in litigation with that, but this was last year.
Now, what are they being charged for if they're in litigation?
So they were charged, they spent 6 days in jail and came out with, they were first charged with reckless endangerment, trespassing, obstructing a public right-of-way, and maybe one other one. The 3 lockdowners, the 3 people sitting down ended up taking a plea and dropped the reckless endangerment charge, but do have probation. But the 2 other people that got arrested are still waiting court. And we were talking during that blockade, this is just like a slash pile that was behind it and in front of it. But we realized, we were talking to some of the workers there, and it was really interesting because for the first time in a blockade that I've experienced in Pennsylvania, the rapport with the workers was very nice. And we actually had a lot of like some of the pipeline fitters and other folks who were like, oh, I wish I brought my banjo, and do you have a hacky sack? And you know, it was kind of festive in a weird way, and they were getting paid, and you could tell who was the manager because they were the ones sweating and they were really upset. But all along the road leading to this pad was just, we had 30 or 40 trucks lined up, and some of the workers were saying, yeah, you cost us probably at least $30,000-$40,000 this past 2 hours. And so this is part of an ongoing campaign. We wanted to tie in that, this isn't just about the Loyalsock, but the Loyalsock is a very important example of the way that public lands and state forests in Pennsylvania have been ravaged and continue to be targeted. And yeah, during that, in the woods, we had crews in the woods doing the blockade, and this was the very energetic rally we had again at the Anadarko headquarters office in Williamsport, which we got a lot of good media for. We got a couple front page newspaper articles, lots of different environmental organizations and media outlets that covered it and put it throughout the internet. So this is part of our ongoing campaign, and right now the status of the Loyalsock is that as of yet they have not done any drilling in the Clarence Moore tracts, this particular area. But right now we're still sort of waiting. We're waiting to see what the next proposal plan from Anadarko is going to be, because their first one was denied because they weren't working with Southwestern. So these 2 companies were butting heads. Now they're working together, and they're going to come up with a new proposal plan. And the DCNR has said that they're going to have a 15-day public comment period once that plan comes out, which is not that long. 15 days is not a lot. There's tons of bigger green groups and other organizations that have actually are pushing for like 30 days or 60-day public comment periods. They've also been, folks are taking, there's Keep It Wild, which is part of the Responsible Drilling Alliance. They were doing hikes through the forests. And so our work, Marcellus, Shale, Earth First, is sort of bringing direct action to the table, and also want to get more people into the forest, create a household name, and win.